Hey, everybody. Hello and welcome to the Live More Life podcast, the good news about your health. The podcast where we dive deep into the world of healthcare, longevity, and health and wellness to bring you the most up-to-date insights and recent breakthroughs, improving your personal health. My name is Dr. Eric Reese, and I'm your host and healthcare co-pilot for this journey to a healthier, happier you. Every week on this podcast, we're going to explore topics ranging from diet and exercise to nutrition and mindset. And especially with this week, we're going to be talking everything there is to know about sleep. We're also going to be discussing recent medical breakthroughs and the new technologies that are coming out on the market, combining the integration of Western and holistic medicine practices into one exciting perspective, all designed to empower you with the knowledge and motivation to live your best life. And in today's episode, I am absolutely honored to have the amazing guest we have today. We're going to be speaking to Dr. Gina Poe. Gina is a renowned neuroscientist. She is a sleep expert, and Gina is absolutely brilliant. So Gina is currently a UCLA professor. She's a researcher. She's also the director of the Brain Research Institute at UCLA. Gina has an extensive background. Gina has sent rats to space, working on a NASA project, which I think is absolutely, without a doubt, one of the coolest things. Gina has spent the last 20 years doing clinical research. She's published over 200 different papers. Her career has spanned from multiple universities all over the U.S. And I'm just so grateful to call her not only a colleague, but a friend at this point, and somebody who I have deep respect for. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Gina onto the stage here. Gina, thank you so much for joining us. I know there are so many people who are excited to have you. Is there anything else that you want to add to what I just described for your background?
Oh, no, I'm just so glad to be here. Thanks so much. I guess I would call my research preclinical rather than clinical.
Fair,
Yeah.
understandable. Yeah. Well, I know your research has really shaped a lot of the way that we think about sleep and really emotional, kind of processing and memories. And so what got you involved in sleep and doing research in the sleep space?
Well, my dad didn't think sleep was worth the time, and so he slept as little as possible. My mother was much more practical about it, and I didn't really think much about it myself until after I graduated from college, and I needed a job. I just needed a job in anywhere that would pay the rent in Los Angeles. So I started out waitressing and I wasn't very good at it. And I tried cocktail waitressing for a day and I hated that. So I just put out the feelers to everybody I knew. Everybody I knew. I need a job. And my dad had a cousin who knew somebody at the VA hospital in Sepulveda who needed a research assistant. And he had been a sleep researcher his whole life, but he has had a new project on trying to tell whether pilots were going unconscious so you could switch the plane to autopilot if they were doing high G maneuvers or for whatever reason. And he needed a research assistant for that. So I got to go up to Edwards Air Force Base and outfit the test pilots with the first portable EEG recording system. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it opened my eyes to research. I had no idea that it could be so much fun.
Yeah. Well, what an interesting opportunity. And so,
Yeah.
Gina, in your bio, you had listed that you had worked on a NASA style project where you had
Yeah.
actually sent rats to space in
Yeah.
1998. Is that accurate?
Yeah. After I finished my PhD at UCLA, I took a postdoc at the University of Arizona. And there they had just won a grant to put some rats into the space shuttle while it orbited the Earth. And the PI, Bruce McNaughton, had the idea that he would check and see whether or not we navigated our world using egocentric cues, like, you know where your body goes and for how far it goes in that direction. And then when it turns, we have these head direction cells in our head. So do we use our own sort of self-motion like ants do, actually, or do we use kind of the world's cues to map the world? So he knew that in space, you could build a maze he called the Escher staircase, which you could go up walls because you're in 0G, it doesn't matter, and then make a 90-degree yaw turn, and then go up another wall, and then
Mm.
another. And there's only 3 9-degree yaw turns would in this corner maze would put you back where you started. And so if it was self-motion cues that were guiding you, you should be off by 90 degrees by another turn each time, because it should be 360 degrees to get you back where you started. But if you're using the world's cues, you would see that, oh, I'm back where I started. And interestingly, the rats were all messed up the first time they ran it in space. But then 4 days later, the second time they ran it, they were all perfectly adapted. So
Interesting. So
yeah,
what was a major takeaway from that for you? Like, obviously there's a component of neuroplasticity and learning, which sleep
yeah.
is heavily involved in, but like, what were some takeaways for you from that experiment?
Well, we're really capable of learning. That's really one of the great takeaways, is that we can adapt, and our
Right.
brains are really, really flexible, including rats' brains. Probably why they're all over the earth. They are very
Right.
adaptable. And so what I really wanted to do, though, because I had done my PhD in basic sleep research, is I wanted to record their sleep right after they ran that maze the first time. And in a few rats, we did get, but we didn't get enough data because time is very limited in the space shuttle. We can't
Sure.
record them forever. But anyway, yeah, that's a major takeaway. Also, the rats had a great time. We stimulated their reward system, the same reward system that gets stimulated with any kind of reward, love, opium, whatever.
Yeah.
And on Earth, they ran that maze, a version of that maze, like crazy for that stimulation. But in space, they counted that as less fun than spinning around and bouncing off walls. And so the
Interesting.
astronaut have to keep putting them on the maze again.
Funny. Well, the question is, what did they tell their rat or mice friends, right? So,
Right, when
when
they
they're,
came home.
you'll never believe what I just did, guys, right?
They all came back to Earth, and they didn't seem very happy about it.
Talk to me a bit about how the evolution of your research has changed. I know you've done a lot with memory, you've done a lot with emotional processing.
Mhm.
If I'm not mistaken, currently right now you're doing some work with PTSD and how memories are formed or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about the journey that you've gone through and kind of just what has continued to drive you. I think that's always an interesting kind of question to ask as well.
So what drives me is the interesting questions and the fact that we just don't know the answers. We spend a third of our lives asleep, and at least when I started, we had no clue about why. And
Mm.
so in the last 30 years, we've really gotten so many more answers. The field has grown from, about 80 in the entire world when I started to probably 8,000, basic science researchers in sleep.
Wow.
Maybe more even. And in that growth, all of those great minds applied to why we sleep, we've come up with some really great answers. And one of them that keeps sort of getting me excited is, what are the mechanisms by which sleep serves memory and the resolution of emotions and the clearing of our minds to be able to learn something new the next day? And what happens if we pay attention to that sleep signal, and what happens when we ignore it? And so we've come up with some great answers. There are still lots of mysteries. Right now, I'm working on a microcircuit in the brain that involves interneurons, which inhibit other interneurons, which excite other cells. And it's a lot of fun. And PTSD is, it's a worldwide problem.
Yeah.
Post-traumatic stress, there's unfortunately a lot of trauma in this world, and people shouldn't have to suffer from that traumatic event for the rest of their lives. They
Yeah.
should be able to put the emotions for that in the past while remembering the important facts that are important for your survival. So I'm trying to figure out how maladaptive sleep that occurs while you're still hyped from that trauma in the first place, might contribute to sort of cementing the trauma in your emotional circuit rather than resolving it and putting it away. Yeah, so I think we're coming up with some really good answers. I have a lot of hope for PTSD and for a sleep solution to it.
So, Gina, two questions come to mind, and I'll just ask them sequentially. So the first one is, what does sleep have to do with PTSD and forming memories. I think that's something that maybe for those who aren't very aware of sleep, like how that is formed. Then the second question I guess I would pose to you is, for somebody who just had an event where that could manifest to PTSD, how
Mhm.
would that differ than somebody who's had an event 10 years ago, who's now has full-blown PTSD? So
Yeah.
I'm curious to kind of get your take on those two questions. Maybe just the first one about sleep and PTSD and how that
Yeah.
process with forming memories or the lack thereof is important for us.
Yeah. Well, when you learn something new, especially something sort of mind-blowingly new, I feel like I need a nap. If I'm, opened this textbook and it's all new to me, after reading for about 15 minutes, I really, feel like I should sleep. And
Yeah.
that is your brain telling you that would be a good idea to sleep. Because one of the first things that happens is it restores your brain energy. Second thing that happens is that it stabilizes that memory.
Mm,
And then the third thing that happens is it integrates that new memory in with everything else that you know. And all of that can happen fairly quickly. The first two processes can happen in the first 20 minutes.
hmm,
And so even a 20-minute nap can be enough to sort of stabilize the memory. And then if you're able to get all the way through a sleep cycle, which is about on average 90 minutes long, which includes the REM sleep cycle, which is the dreaming state, then you can really do a fine-tuned incorporation of that new information with all the schema that you already have in your brain. So what happens with post-traumatic stress disorder is after that traumatic event, you are going through all of those sleep cycles, but instead of your brain chemistry being right for downscaling the memory once it's been consolidated to the rest of your brain, the brain chemistry is such that it continues to strengthen that traumatic memory. And once that happens, it sets up sort of this positive feedback loop.
interesting.
So
Is there anything that you've seen with your research that would make somebody more prone to having that process happen, that maladaptive sleep process happen, versus not, right? So
yeah.
let's say you and I experience the same traumatic event, or we see a car accident, right?
Mhm.
And you're able to go to sleep that night, and you're like, yeah, I saw a car accident yesterday, but I'm safe and I'm okay. Whereas I saw that and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel triggered now. I feel very sensitive, and I have a hard time with that. Are there any specific differences that you've noticed? Are there any circuits that you've found, like anything that kind of makes you think, hey, this person's maybe more prone or less prone to having that experience happen?
Yeah, well, for better or for worse, we have not yet found a sort of biomarker to show whether or not someone would be more or less prone to post-traumatic stress disorder. It is possible that those who get less good sleep before the traumatic event would be more prone to have it because their drive for sleep is a little stronger. And
Mm,
so they are able to go to sleep even when their emotional system is still hyped. And so, so if you get really good night's sleep beforehand, you have the both emotional space and the synaptic space, the connections between neurons, to encode all of the aspects of that traumatic event so that you don't generalize it to other things, so that it stays specific to what happened. And then also, you can wait to sleep until your emotional system is ready to sleep normally instead of sleep in that hyperactive state.
interesting. So back to my second question. Let's take two individuals. One of them had an event that happened today, right? And they're going to go to
Mhm.
sleep tonight. They experienced a traumatic event. And then you have somebody who 10 years ago had that event happen, and they have a diagnosis of PTSD. Are there things that they should do or shouldn't do for their sleep,
Mm,
for those memories? I mean, for somebody who's had PTSD for a while, I'm going to make the assumption they've tried things. They have
yeah.
medication, there's psychotherapy, there's EMDR, ART, which is trying to change and retag memories with different visual and different neurocognitive cues. But
Yeah.
for somebody who's just like, I had this event happen today,
What should I
should they be
do?
scared to go to sleep? Right?
Right,
Then we'd say no. But like, what's going
right.
on in that conversation?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, with a lot of traumatic events, the old recommendation is to watch the patient. Don't let them go to sleep for a while. And in fact,
Interesting.
that could be a really good thing to do, even with an emotional trauma. So even if you feel pressed right after the emotionally traumatic event to go to sleep right away, unless you can at first sort of resolve and learn something from that trauma, you probably shouldn't go to sleep right away. You shouldn't go to sleep until you're able to sort of put it in the context of the worldview that you have, learn from it. If it's something you can't learn from, then at least, schematize it in a way that helps you gain perspective on the
Yeah.
event, and that calms your emotional system and allows you to sleep truly peacefully.
Hmm.
Um, so, crying on a friend's shoulder, talking it through in terms of trying to figure out, what could have happened or what could have, happened to avoid it, or
Yeah.
how it's all going to be fine in the end. If your worldview is that, all of those things are good things to do before you go to sleep. And then the evidence shows that then your sleep could be peaceful and normal. And even though it will still be a trauma that you'll have to work through in the next days, weeks, maybe even a couple of months, it will ultimately resolve. But if you go to sleep without having done that, then it could be that you're rather just cementing the trauma in your memory. And
Wow.
so if it's an old trauma, if it's an old PTSD that you have, actually the best recommendation so far is to sort of relive the trauma as much as you can while you're awake, and then do that same process of sort of resolving it in terms of light of the world view that you have, or learning from it, also crying on a friend's shoulder,
Sure.
someplace safe, so you can recontextualize it in an atmosphere of safety, and then again sleeping on it. It might be that you would need also some sort of medicine that would help you sleep more normally than the PTSD sleep. So the PTSD sleep is still a hyperactive emotional sleep. So there are some medications like propranolol, which is not no longer in patent. So if you take that after reliving the emotional event and just before you sleep, that stays on board and that could help. So there's also another neuroadrenaline, anti-neuroadrenaline drug that could help, called prazosin. That's a different receptor for the adrenaline that's coursing through your brain.
Yeah. Interesting.
Um, but also those, at least propranolol has some side effects, like it reduces your melatonin levels,
Yeah.
and melatonin helps you get a really good night's sleep. So you might want to combine it with some melatonin because, anyway, that it's not yet worked out. Let's just put it
Fair.
that way. It's not
Yeah.
yet worked out.
That's a valid response. I've learned that if there is somebody in my life who does have an event that's stressful, keep them
Mhm.
up for a bit. Let's have a conversation, and then they can go to sleep, and hopefully they process it in the right way, right? And so
Right.
that's really helpful and quite practical. So
If you just have them relive it with you without the resolution, the
yeah,
emotional resolution, that doesn't help.
agreed.
That
Good point. Valid point for that.
really,
Yeah,
really need
yeah,
to contextualize it, put it in the context of now you're safe, and try and learn from it in any way you can.
yeah. I appreciate that caveat. So
Mm,
Gina, this is just the resounding question I always get from whether it's patients, whether it's people. It's like,
mm,
okay, I know I need to sleep, but
mm,
I struggle with sleep.
mm,
And I've tried medications, or I've tried the melatonin, right? So,
mhm.
what is your opinion on medicines and medications that are touted to actually help people sleep? Can you just give us your opinion on that to start off?
Yeah,
And then I think the other thing I always get from people is, what can I do to improve my sleep?
right.
Every time I tell somebody we're working together on a project, Sleep Glide, and trying to build out some algorithms and help people sleep, they're like, sign me up, right? I'll
Yeah,
be the first beta tester. Like every single person, right? And statistically
yeah,
speaking, like 1 in 3 people struggle with sleep in some way, shape,
mhm,
or form globally.
yeah,
So, what do you think about sleep medications as a
mhm,
modality? And then the second part is, if that's not the best option, what
yeah,
other ways can people actually do or use
yeah.
to improve their sleep?
Okay, I'm gonna break that down into 3 questions.
Let's do it.
And the first one is good news that sleep is so tied to our autonomic nervous system, our fight or flight, which inhibits sleep, or our rest and digest, which helps sleep, that most interventions, and I put it in quotes just because there are lots of things out there that really don't do anything
Yeah.
physiologically to you. Like, for example, one of my roommates was having trouble with insomnia, a spate of insomnia, and my other roommate said, "Oh, no problem. Don't worry about it. I'm going to give you my magic pillow." And pillow. But, that idea that this was a magic pillow that was going to help her sleep, she slept like a baby. I mean, it was really great. We have a really powerful way of, if we believe something,
Yes.
making it true.
Yeah,
Right?
the placebo effect is a very real thing, and there's a reason in a
Yeah,
lot of high quality studies there's a double-blind, placebo-controlled variable,
that's right.
isn't there? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So that's good news, because a lot of the things that maybe really aren't helpful can be helpful if you think that they're going to be. But having said that, there are real sleep medications that have effects, sleeping pills that have been prescribed, and they're not horrible. It's just that some of them don't allow you to have the normal sleep, all the sleep stages in the
Mm,
order that they're supposed to be, with all the characteristics that they're supposed to have. So, yeah, they knock you out, kind of like alcohol knocks you out, but the kind of sleep that you get is not necessarily the healthy sleep that does all of the memory resolving and information shelving kind of
sure.
activity. So, but there are some that are better than others, and I don't know if this is the forum to mention the names of them, but I can write them to you, and you can share them.
Sure.
And any,
Yeah, happy to do that. I don't wanna put you on the platform at all, so
and I don't have any
absolutely. We'll just
conflicts of interest. I have no financial associations with any of these companies,
yeah,
but
fair. Agreed.
there are
Appreciate
some that
that.
are, yeah, some are pretty good. I would take them if I
Okay.
needed them. But I think the best thing is to best quality sleep you can get is sleep that is after a day in which you've exercised. So exercise is really good for promoting a healthy sleep. And then also a sleep that where you're really paying attention to your own body and sleeping at the right circadian time. It means time
Mhm.
of day in relation to your own natural melatonin release. Is if you're under age 60, you've got great melatonin release. You probably don't need to be taking melatonin unless you're switching time zones so by 3 hours or more, because you've got all the melatonin you need normally. If you're not a shift worker, if you're a shift worker, you might want to take it,
Sure.
because it's really hard to. Melatonin is very sensitive to light. It gets suppressed with light, and so it's a hormone of darkness. And so, if the light dark cycle around you isn't well attuned with your time you want to sleep, it can be very difficult. So, yeah, listening to your own body, sleeping at the right circadian phase. And that means to do that, you need to get up in the morning. If morning time is when you get up, and expose yourself to that bright light,
Yeah.
because that helps set your circadian phase to the right proper time. Get some exercise that day, and then do relaxation exercises. Sometimes it's a routine for people, and sometimes it's taking a bath or a shower before you go to bed, reading a entertaining book that keeps your mind off of the troubles or stresses that you have. Take your mind off of it. Shouldn't be too exciting and entertaining or stressful. Even if you like, murder mysteries, you might not want to do a
Fair.
murder mystery, because you don't want to hype yourself up. You want to just do the slow calm into a restful sleep.
Good. I like that. Yeah, is there anything else that you would recommend for people, if they are struggling with it? Let's say they are, going to bed at the same time, waking up in the morning, getting exercise. I don't know if there's a difference between morning, afternoon, or evening. I'm sure just kind of based off of the autonomics and that feedback, maybe it does matter. Like you don't want to exercise right before you go to bed because you'll probably be pretty ramped up. But um,
That says to me anyway.
yeah, for same. I've always just been like, get up in the morning, go for my morning workout, get the hard
Yeah.
thing done during the day, and then also too, just kind of my body gets into a phase where I'm now waking up without my alarm clock because my body's
Mhm.
almost ready to do that. And so,
Yeah.
but what if people are still struggling after that? Are there any relaxation techniques that you like? Is there anything you talk about? Maybe temperature. Um,
Yeah.
what happens when your partner, is a night owl and you're an early worm, right? So like, how is there any help or support on those sides of things?
Yeah, I think breathing is one of the great ways to get your autonomic nervous system into the rest and digest mode. So, sort of a slow, deep breathing. Sometimes it's that combined with meditation or prayer that helps people to just kind of glide into um, a, a mode where sleep can overtake them. So a breathing exercise could be a really good one. And I don't mean the kind of like hyperventilation breathing the kind that would actually wake you up. There's kind of breathing that could wake you up.
Yeah.
Or make you more alert. I'm talking about the kind of breathing that is consistent with kind of way you breathe when you're asleep, which is, slow and regular. Actually, I cannot breathe as slow when I'm awake as when I'm asleep. My
Yeah.
brain just says no, even though it's perfectly fine for oxygen consumption and all that.
Fair.
So yeah, breathing exercises, meditation or prayer, something that helps you calm down. Sometimes if you're really stressed at work or with your family, you can get it out of your system by writing a list. Tomorrow, this is what I'm going to do to
Mm,
address this stress.
mm,
And once you got it on a list, you can sort of put it away and say, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. If it's something you're really stressed about, if the deadline is looming and you're afraid you're not going to have enough time tomorrow, it's not going to kill you to spend a little time working on it now, enough to
sure.
make you feel like, okay, now it's in hand. Tomorrow I can pick up where I left off.
Yeah, fair. I think that's a valid point. And I think, I know I myself sometimes I'm like, I need to get 8 hours. I need to get 8 hours no matter
Yeah,
what, non-negotiable, right? Because,
yeah.
the body keeps a score and you can't make up for lost sleep. And, I've gone too deep down in the rabbit hole, but sometimes too, we forget how resilient the human nervous system is and how resilient
Yeah.
we are as people, right? And so
Yes.
I'm sure there have been nights where you're like, gosh, I didn't get enough sleep last night, but it's going to
Yeah.
be okay. And you're a sleep researcher, right? So,
Yep.
um, it happens
A
on
little
that.
bit
So
bed a little earlier tonight or whenever I can. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think we sometimes we're not, binary, and it's not you either slept good or you didn't. You're always on the spectrum. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that little reminder for myself as well too. So thank you for
Right.
that, Gina.
Right.
Gina, we are almost out of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave the viewers or the listeners here with, as far as like a parting message before I do my outro?
Well, I do want to say that there are some people in the world who have very stressful situations. Maybe there's a war going on around them. I don't know what I could say except that I hope that you've got safety or can
Hmm.
find safety, and that you can find it within yourself and those around you to comfort one another. We are really powerful social creatures, and so try and seek comfort in those around you so that you can cry it out and have a good night's sleep. It helps, I think, avoid future conflicts because, again, we resolve our emotions
Hmm.
while we sleep. So, sleep depriving yourself is not good for keeping the peace. And so, it is, I think, in a way, a luxury for us to talk about how can I sleep better.
Yeah.
There are people in the world who are truly facing dire circumstances. And so, I guess one thing you can do if you're not facing that truly dire circumstance is feel grateful, and that attitude of gratitude can also really help you sleep better.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Gina. I think that is a good reminder too. We talk about sleep, and we have a choice in what we can or can't
Yeah,
do. Not everybody in the world does have that. So,
yeah,
thank you so much, and Gina, thank you again for just everything you're doing. Not only I just have so much respect for you. I'm grateful to call you a colleague and a friend, but you're doing so many great things in the neuroscience space, in the sleep space. I know you have efforts where you're helping that just new up and coming individuals in research to get their
oh,
footing, and you're always teaching. You are just truly somebody that fully embodies that entire system. So thank you for what you're doing and all the efforts you have. So very grateful to have you on the show today. So Gina, you've been an absolute pleasure. And that is going to be it for our episode of Live More Life podcast. I hope you found it enlightening and inspiring like I have. Gina is an absolute wealth of knowledge. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. And please remember to tune in for the next episode of the Live More Life podcast. Visit our website. You'll find links for Gina. We'll post those later. Don't forget to follow us on all the major platforms as well. We'll be posting that once we go through post-production. And that's it for the Live More Life podcast. So tune in the next time. And for those of you who are joining us, thank you. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.